This is August 11th, 2023, Political Dharma, and I'm Alan Zundell, and I have a guest with me today, Jen M. of the Democratic Socialists of America. Good afternoon, Jen.
Hello, Alan. Thank you for
Once
having
again,
me.
pretending we haven't already been speaking just a moment ago. So Jen was a delegate or an alternate delegate, right? So you didn't
That's
actually
right.
get to vote on anything.
I voted, I think one time, just kind of took the place briefly, but yes, yes.
Okay, so she was at the Democratic Socialists of America National Convention last weekend, which was like August 4th through 6th, and in Chicago. So she came back to here to Oregon just recently, like a few days ago, and had a long trip by train. So she may be not quite entirely with it, as you told me. But we're going to be asking her about what went on there and giving us some kind of way to make sense of what's going on in the DSA and where it might be headed in the future. So the two things that went on that I'm aware of anyway at DSA's conventions is they vote on resolutions and they elect people to the NPC, correct?
That's correct. That's
So
correct.
why don't
Those are
you
the,
first tell us about
Mhm.
yourself and your connection to the DSA
Sure.
briefly, and then we'll launch into the convention.
Mhm. Yeah. My name is Jen. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Eugene, Oregon. I helped found the Eugene chapter of DSA back in 2017. I was the co-chair, or I was the chair of Eugene DSA until 2019, when I was elected to the National Political Committee. I served one term there, ran for re-election in 2021 and was re-elected, and now just finished that second term. In addition to being on the National Political Committee, I served as the chair of the National Tech Committee, the liaison to the Mutual Aid Working Group and the Housing Justice Commission, and have been involved in all kinds of different things throughout my time in DSA.
So you do have an insider's perspective on some of this.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I've been
obviously
very
this.
deep into national for many years now.
Okay. So what would you say your main takeaway from the convention is? Is it changing direction? Is it holding course? What's going on?
Yeah, I think I feel like we came out of the convention with a much more mature DSA. And this is definitely our smoothest convention since the dawn of the new DSA, you'd say, since 2017. Definitely a lot of political maturity has happened. Debates um, were full of really good substance.
And that's something I read online with a few comments
Mhm.
too, is people simply saying there wasn't as much, I guess, drama as there
Mhm.
had been in previous, and people were able to work more
Yeah,
collegially,
yeah.
even though there's some pretty serious differences between people.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely saw this year the rise of some new caucuses, the Marxist Unity Group, Reform and Revolution, Red Star Caucus, which was a local to San Francisco caucus, which then branched out nationally, North Star Caucus, Socialist Majority, Bread and Roses, and then a slate called Groundwork. So a lot of different tendencies represented in the Libertarian Socialist Caucus. And it felt a lot more collegial, a lot of groups working together despite their differences.
The thing I was trying to sort out mostly is there's caucuses that put up slates of candidates for the NPC. Now, first
Mhm.
of all, the National Political Committee is the highest body in the national DSA
Outside of conventions, yes,
outside of
yes.
the conventions, right? So the
Mhm.
membership makes decisions at the conventions, and the NPC is to carry that out. How
That's
many
correct.
people are the on the NPC
Mhm.
in total, and how many were elected at this convention? Was the whole
Mhm.
body replaced, or how does that work?
So there is a total re-election every 2 years. There are 16 members of the National Political Committee, along with two members of YDSA that each cast half a vote. The YDSA co-chairs serve.
YDSA is Young
That's
Democratic
correct.
Socialists of America.
That's correct. And they
Are
had
we
their convention just a few days before the DSA convention.
okay? So there's 16. Well, that
Mhm.
was including those two, right?
Not including.
YDSA,
So
not including.
17
So,
votes total. Mhm.
and it seemed like it was a change in the balance between caucuses. if I'm reading things correctly. Is that your take as well?
I would say so. I think the balance has shifted a bit. The last NPC was kind of at a stalemate at the end. Was met with a lot of kind of animosity between NPC members and their representative groups. This NPC has a much wider variety, I think, of groups represented, and they all they have to work together to get anything done. There is no super majority or anything like that. They will have to work together.
So am I right that previous board was kind of factionalized into two main groups that have different visions, but now a greater variety of tendencies are present, and they're going to have to form coalitions, which means there'll be some compromise rather than one side or the other trying to dominate.
Yeah, I would say so. Yes, definitely.
And how would you characterize the two sides that previously were causing a stalemate? Who's on what side? What are they based on? What's the ideology or tendency or what's going on there?
I think so kind of on it kind of took towards the Socialist Majority Caucus and those now represented from the groundwork slate previous called G&D or Green New Deal slate. Kind of on the one side, and then on the other you had kind of bread and roses and independent candidates or independent National Political Committee members. This time we don't really have a lot of the independents. We have one independent, Louisa, who ran on an internationalism focused candidacy, but everyone else ran on a slate or as part of a caucus.
So you mentioned bread and roses and you mentioned socialist majority. Socialist majority, as I understand it, were taking a slow approach to breaking with the Democratic Party. And the bread and roses was saying, let's speed things up a little bit, but not a break right now. That's one of the differences I could see.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm looking at the list of different caucuses now, and some of them are pretty clearly Marxist in orientation. Has that been much of a dividing line, how seriously people take Marxism? I heard this one, the blog that I mentioned to you earlier by Evan Collerton from Chicago, who was there. He was dividing these caucus coalitions between what he called reformers and revolutionaries, which I thought was a little dramatic. But would you agree that there's something along the lines of how they want to approach electoral politics?
As far as electoralism, maybe I mean, there is no one that I could see on the NPC, nor has really there ever been since I've been on it, that has been anti-electoralism. I think it's just a matter of kind of the approach to be taken. I think that there is definitely I would tend to agree with the kind of the reform versus revolution kind of line there. Some may say left or right or however you may approach it. But definitely a bit of a difference there. But as far as like the electoral piece of it, I mean, I think there is widespread agreement in DSA that, electoralism is still needed. And I think from my conversations, it's just that I don't think it's really possible in this country to make a definitive dirty break, right? I mean, geography is it's all dependent on your geography. In some places like Eugene, maybe you could. In other places, not so much. So I see us making steps towards that, like we saw with the towards, and I can't remember the name of the amendment, the party, the towards a party,
towards an independent party, something like that.
Yeah, the act like an independent party that passed. Right. That was the bread and roses amendment, but the towards a party like electoral strategy did not. Now that called for more of a break, and called for what I would call like harder red lines for endorsements of candidates.
Okay, so I'm going to take one more pass at trying to characterize this to see if we can get it more
Yeah.
accurate. Maybe the dividing line was not electoralism or even political philosophy. Maybe it's more along the lines of how friendly people want to be towards the Democratic Party, as opposed to how much we want to clearly distinguish ourselves from that party. Would that be more accurate?
Per, even then, I don't think that there is a clear line there. I mean, even Bread and Roses, who would want to have more of a break, still understands the need to run on the Democratic Party line at times. So I still think it's a bit fuzzy there as far as electoralism. I think the convention did decide very closely to not make those harder lines. You saw that not only towards a party-like electoral strategy, but in the fact that the anti-Zionist amendment to the resolutions did not go further either, which would have created very definitive red lines on endorsements.
Okay, I'm looking at my notes, and in my previous episode, I did talk about CR, that's Consensus Resolution 6. Mm-hmm. And the Act Like an Independent Party resolution was an amendment to that, right? So if I'm remembering right, there's a line already in the DSA's constitution or platform or something, probably the platform, laying out the general strategy, which has been called the dirty break. You stick with the Democrats until you feel you can escape. And how big was the change to it? Was that a big change in the language of it? It doesn't seem like it was. Well, and this consensus resolution passed by a pretty clear margin, 96% to 4%. So it seems like maybe everybody's happy with the status quo, or
yeah. So I mean, the consensus resolution passed overwhelmingly, but all the details were in the amendments, and so really you had those two different approaches. Bread and Roses Act Like an Independent Party, specifying that that DSA should present a kind of a third democratic socialist alternative outside of the two-party system whenever possible, versus more of the kind of red line on endorsements that the party-like electoral strategy amendment called for, which failed. But it failed 372 yes to 541 no. So there is still, I think, room for discussion there. And I think what this all says to me is that, from 2017 increasingly until now, we're seeing more maturity. We're seeing our kind of strategy develop, honing that more. And I would expect to see in 2025 probably a straight up clean, dirty break, just break from them completely. There was, if I recall correctly, an amendment that did not make the agenda to completely break off. And that was called for by one of the caucus's Red Labor out of who ran a slate of candidates.
Well, let me read the language that did pass as an amendment. It says that the DSA would present a third Democratic Socialist alternative, doesn't say party, but Democratic Socialist alternative for working class people outside of the two-party system, with candidates who, wherever possible, publicly run as Democratic Socialists. Doesn't sound too different than what we've been doing for the last several years or decades.
Even. And I would agree with that. I think something really important that I have, I think as an organization we have yet to discuss is, what do we mean when we use the word party? Are we using it in the electoral sense, like Democrats, Republicans? Are we using it in terms of how we've seen international parties use it? I don't think that we have shared language around what it means to be a party.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me, because party has pretty broad meanings. It can be any group of
Yeah.
people working together who have a similar
Right.
orientation towards what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So this pretty much is still going forward in the same direction. People are working together better.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that this is
I think
where they're
so.
going. They're going to have to,
Mm-hmm.
not such a, red dividing line. And I guess the amendment that failed was one that would have said, we got to hold our endorsed elected candidates in public office to a more stringent, we're not going to endorse you or we're going to repudiate you or something strong like that, versus trying
Mm-hmm.
to understand their position and sometimes accommodate their need for flexibility. Sounds
Mm-hmm.
like everybody's coming to that
Mm-hmm.
same understanding of all those things, that we're on a particular track and there's no need to try to hurry it up or move backwards. Is
Mm-hmm.
that right?
Um, yes, I think though it's getting more organized. Um, in the last term, we definitely saw the need to develop that federal socialists in office program. Um, there is still that need for it. We still do have federal candidates. We need to develop those relationships. I think that I I mean, among those that I talk to, I think, I would say the need to not focus so much on federal level politics yet. Continue to build that bunch. An amendment to the electoral resolution I was very excited about is the Run DSA Candidates for School Boards amendment. Building up that bench, building that cadre, so that we can move uh, move in a more organized way. I think that we can't rely on the AOCs of the world. I think in some cases that's an anomaly, but we have to do the actual work to build the bench. And I see that kind of maturity happening in DSA now through this last convention.
This is a conflict that I think is on all our minds, is that, okay, realistic, you see a long-term strategy. We're going to try to get local offices, get some experience and credibility as candidates, move up towards state level offices, perhaps, and in
Mm-hmm.
some cases, run candidates when they're ready.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the same time, we see the national and international global situation really needing immediate attention.
That's
Like
right.
far down the road of climate change,
That's
the
right.
financial system worldwide seems always teetering on the brink of collapse. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I suppose there was tension around that as well, or just
Right.
like how fast can we move, or how can we move fast? Even was there any
Right.
side conversations where you got a sense of, do we even have a strategy that makes sense in the kind of world we find ourselves in?
I didn't see those kinds of really big kinds of strategies. I I think one thing I was excited about is the Green New Deal campaign committee. Their consensus resolution now goes back to focusing on chapter work and doing that kind of uh, uh, climate work at the more local level, which I like. Um, I think, from my perspective, these big national campaigns have not been very successful. I know that we need big sweeping change, but I don't know that we're organized enough yet to make that kind of big sweeping change.
Nor do we have the
And
numbers.
we don't have the numbers, and it's important right now. We need to improve material conditions for people, right now across the country. It's going to be like 105 in Eugene on Monday, right? Like, we
Yeah.
need to be able to improve conditions for people. We need to be able to exert that kind of power and start building that, so that we can really exert it on the national level once we have it.
Mm-hmm. This same blog that I was referring to, even by earlier, by Evan Collerton, he was saying different orientations towards action. Let me see if I can find these now. Yeah, he was saying there's been somewhat of a focus on elections, and there's been some that focus on labor organizing labor. But he said
That's right.
the position that seems to be gaining more strength is focusing on legislation, meaning let's lobby to get changes at the state and local level, like in New York, where they had an
Mm-hmm.
effort to take advantage of money available from the federal government to build
Mm-hmm.
new clean energy plants.
Mm-hmm.
But you look like I'm not so sure about that.
I don't agree. I think right now it's labor and housing, and I am very happy that our labor resolution passed. The consensus resolution passed. I was particularly um, happy that the a couple of the amendments were struck down, but the local EWOC, or Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, that amendment passed, so we can focus those kind of local efforts on labor organizing, along with the housing consensus resolution, which passed as part of the consent agenda, building tenant power and organization, building up what they have, ETOC, Emergency Tenant Organizing Committee. I think those are bread and butter areas of organizing and sites of struggle that are incredibly important, and will do a lot to organize, to improve material conditions for people, recruit to DSA, but recruit to socialism altogether, and build, in my mind, what I see as a party, which is less, yes, has electoralism in it, but is not the main focus.
Stu, when Bernie ran and AOC won, there was an influx of interest. That was all electoralism, getting excited about political campaigns. And then there's
However,
this, okay, go ahead.
however, at the time, it was also Occupy ICE was also happening at the
Right.
exact same time, and we got a lot of new members from that too,
And
and
that
that
was
became, I mean, that kind of spread across the country.
and that was
Um,
DSA involved in that. They were
DSA was involved.
the spear point of that.
Partially in conjunction with other groups, but as well as the Muslim ban at airports. There were a lot of protests at airports. I think that the idea that it was solely Bernie or solely Trump's election or solely AOC is misplaced and doesn't bear out in the actual membership numbers in DSA. Back in 2019, I did an analysis of the membership numbers that we were given from 2017 until then, and it didn't bear out that it was just those elections. And even in the rhetoric of the emails at the time, it wasn't just about those elections.
Well, that's interesting. Where I was going with that is saying the movement from all the focus on the elections towards now you're saying labor and tenant organizing.
Mm-hmm.
That's like I think I'd agree with you. It's maturity saying we don't have that much clout in the electoral arena, especially the way the electoral system is
Mm-hmm.
run, the importance
Mm-hmm.
of money and getting on a ballot and all the rest like
Mm-hmm.
that. So we
Mm-hmm.
see that we really need to deepen our roots among ordinary people,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise, if you're just going for a self-identified democratic socialist who's, they're already, it's more of an ideological
Mm-hmm.
formation than one that actually can appeal to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So you're
Mm-hmm.
shaking your head. You agree with it, all of
Yeah,
that.
I agree with all of that. Yeah, and what a good way to build like militant organization through labor and tenant unions and that type of organizing.
That's very directly tied towards their lives. The biggest things in their
Mhm.
lives
That's
right
right.
now is keeping housing, keeping a roof over their head,
That's right.
and having a decent job,
Hmm.
work conditions, which
Hmm.
seems like fewer and fewer people have something like that.
Right.
So
Right.
I interrupted you with a lot of questions. I don't know, did you have thoughts that I sidetracked that you really wanted to get out there to give a fuller picture of what went on?
Hmm. I think that the one thing we haven't touched on yet is internationalism. The which I'm really excited about. The International Committee's consensus resolution passed by a very, very wide margin, but also there was an amendment that failed, that failed overwhelmingly, that would have changed a bit of the approach towards international parties and international groups. So it's very I was very happy with the results of our internationalism amendments and resolutions. And, we were putting together the group delegation going to Cuba. The application is open until, I think, mid-August. So very excited for that continued internationalism work. I went on a delegation 2 years ago to Venezuela, and it was completely transformative to be able to have that experience and bring that back to informing my politics and orientation in DSA. So I'm excited for other groups to be able to do that as well.
I'm sure you got a very different picture than what we're hearing in the media or from
Absolutely.
politicians. So it looks like we're coming to the end of our time here. I want to thank you very much for giving your insights on what's going on in the DSA. I'm happy to hear some of the things you're saying. Been grappling a lot to try to understand what I haven't been paying attention to because, national politics can seem so remote from anything we can control right now.
Yeah.
Any famous last words for this?
I'm really excited for where DSA is. I came out of the convention just feeling so energized. I'm just really excited about DSA. I came out of the convention just so pumped. And thinking about the possibilities and where we go from here, and it is bittersweet for a little bit for me. 4 years is a long time to be in national leadership. And so I'm kind of like, what do I do now? So thinking through that, but I'm very excited with the new National Political Committee, and I know they're going to do great things. One last note, just to say that we did reaffirm at the convention our 1% for the 99%. So the National Political Committee in our last term passed a resolution to call for income-based dues, 1% of your income to DSA, and that was reaffirmed at convention. And it's been really heartening to see members posting online that they are moving to income-based dues. So to your viewers out there who are DSA members, I hope you'll consider income-based dues. If you're not a DSA member, consider joining dsausa.org/join.
Thank you. And I should mention as well that the two other things I mentioned in my last video on this were the resolution that had to do with no endorsement for Joe Biden and another one having to do with ranked choice voting, and neither of those came to the floor. So apparently there wasn't that much interest in either. I just want to make sure people had an update on that.
Yeah.
And what was the other thing you just mentioned? Oh, money. As you said to me at one of our meetings, the DSA is running out of money pretty fast.
Yeah. And we did just pass a suite of resolutions that call for spending. So actually one big change is full-time co-chairs. So we already have in the DSA Constitution calling for co-chairs of DSA, but this resolution called for them to be paid. So we will have an election coming up, I think in November, to elect those two co-chairs amongst the NPC members who were elected, and they would get paid full-time for 2 years to be co-chairs. So we did pass quite a few resolutions that call for spending, and so we'll need to do some recruiting and dues paying.
Yeah, well, a word out there to anybody watching: you can join DSA or re-up your dues. That will certainly help them be able to move forward. But I suspect there's going to be some adjustments in priorities. You sound a lot like the United States Congress. It's easy to pass things spending money, harder to pass things raising money.
That's true.
Okay, thanks a lot, and we'll see you later.
Yep, thank you.
With ease, I see the chains are breaking. We gained our focus, the moves we're making will prove to determine our self-worth as a passenger on this vehicle Earth.